The crowd laughed when a guardsman suddenly broke character, leading tourists in TikTok dances. But as his bizarre behavior escalated, suspicion grew. By the time police arrived, the shocking truth left everyone stunned. Here's how it all unfolded. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We share the untold stories, secrets, and traditions of the British Guards every day. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. At Buckingham Palace, the scene was as picture-perfect as you'd expect. A line of stoic Queen's Guards stood like statues, their iconic red uniforms and towering bearskin hats screaming tradition. The crowd of tourists pressed against the gates, cameras clicking furiously. Americans, Europeans, and a group of enthusiastic schoolchildren from China all jostled for the best view. It was a textbook display of British decorum, until it wasn't. One guard, a tall man in his mid-30s, with sandy blonde hair and a mischievous glint in his eye, suddenly broke formation. He stepped forward with a theatrical flair, drawing audible gasps from the crowd. His voice boomed across the courtyard. "Attention, citizens and tourists!" People froze. Was this a special announcement? A royal surprise? "Her Majesty has personally asked me to teach you TikTok dances." A ripple of confusion and awkward laughter spread. Surely this wasn't serious. But before anyone could question him, the guard pulled a Bluetooth speaker from his pocket, hit play, and cranked up a viral TikTok track. The courtyard filled with upbeat music as the man launched into a wildly exaggerated version of the gritty. His arms swung like windmills, his legs hopped with cartoonish enthusiasm, and, somehow, he kept his face perfectly stoic. The absurd contrast between his wild movements and the trademark composure of a Queen's Guard made the scene both hilarious and unsettling. Karen, a hefty American woman, proudly sporting a Stars and Stripes t-shirt, was the first to break the silence. "Go, soldier! Show us what you've got!" she hollered, filming with her phone. Nearby, a man in a Make America Great Again cap stood slack-jawed, as if his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The guard barked his next order. "Everyone line up, follow my lead." To everyone's surprise, the crowd began to obey. Tourists shuffled into a loose formation, awkwardly attempting to mimic his erratic dance moves. Some giggled uncontrollably, others watched in disbelief. You thought the Queen's Guard represented dignity and discipline. The moment seemed to sneer. Not today. For now, the crowd was hooked, laughing, cheering, and dancing along, but things were about to get even stranger. The guard was in full swing, leading his chaotic TikTok session like a deranged drill sergeant at a dance camp. Tourists clumsily mimicked his moves, some giggling uncontrollably while others recorded the spectacle with wide-eyed amazement. But not everyone was convinced by this impromptu show of royal entertainment. George, a British tour guide in his mid-50s, adjusted his tweed jacket with an air of indignation. His neatly combed gray hair and stiff posture exuded disapproval as he stepped forward to confront the dancing anomaly. "Excuse me, sir," George declared, his voice sharp and precise, "but this is highly irregular. Queen's Guards do not perform TikTok dances." The guard, mid-step, turned to George with exaggerated flair, spinning on his heel. "Irregular? I'm the king of TikTok, mate," he snapped. "Now, do you want to dance, or do you want to explain to Her Majesty why you refused her direct orders?" George blinked, momentarily stunned by the absurdity of the reply. Karen, still filming with her phone, seized the opportunity to jump to the guard's defense. "Let the man do his job," she barked, wagging her finger at George. "He's making history here." George let out a long, weary sigh, turning to his group of equally bewildered tourists. "This is absurd. The Queen's Guard would never behave like this. Something is clearly off. Meanwhile, a bold teenager in a Union Jack hoodie stepped forward, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Oi, mate," he called out. "If you're so official, why don't you show us how to march properly?" Without hesitation, the guard straightened up, puffed out his chest, and began goose-stepping across the courtyard. But instead of precision, his movements were a ridiculous parody. He raised his knees comically high, flailed his arms like a puppet, and glared at the crowd with exaggerated seriousness. The tourists erupted into laughter, some nearly doubling over. George, however, muttered under his breath, "This is an outrage." Not everyone was amused. A middle-aged woman with sharp features and a skeptical glare pulled out her phone and whispered to her companion, "I'm calling the police. This can't be real." As the guard spun dramatically and struck a triumphant pose, the faint sound of sirens grew in the distance. The game was far from over. The courtyard was alive with laughter, the guard basking in his bizarre moment of glory as he led the tourists in one last ridiculous spin. But as the crowd's amusement reached a crescendo, the cracks in his performance began to show. A keen-eyed tourist, camera still in hand, suddenly squinted and exclaimed, "Wait a minute, his boots don't match the uniform." The ripple of realization was immediate. Another tourist gasped, pointing at the towering bearskin hat. "And his hat, it's made of felt?" A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd, replacing the earlier laughter. The once adoring audience was now scrutinizing every detail. The mood shifted quickly, suspicion taking the place of awe. Karen, ever the loyal defender, stepped forward, her face flushed with determination. "Y'all are just jealous," she yelled, crossing her arms. "He's making history, and you can't handle it." The guard, sensing his ruse unraveling, decided it was time to up the ante. With a dramatic flourish, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a shiny plastic crown. Placing it on his head with the grace of a Broadway star, he raised his arms to the crowd. "As your new King of Buckingham, I hereby declare today National Dance Day. Bow before me." The crowd froze for a beat, torn between disbelief and stifled laughter. A few chuckled nervously while others glanced at each other, unsure if they were witnessing a joke or a complete meltdown. Then, faintly at first, the sound of approaching sirens cut through the murmurs. The guard froze mid-bow, his eyes darting toward the source of the noise. For the first time, he looked genuinely nervous. "Uh-oh," he muttered under his breath, before quickly spinning back to face the crowd with a strained grin. "All right, who wants a selfie with royalty before I'm off to my next royal duty?" Phones were raised, but the excitement was now tinged with uncertainty. As the sirens grew louder, the crowd began to part, revealing an unmistakable scene of looming accountability. The guard knew his time was running out, but he wasn't finished yet. As two real Queen's Guards marched into the courtyard, the impostor attempted to slip away. His cartoonish attempts at blending into the crowd only made him stand out more. A pair of police officers arrived shortly after, quickly cornering him. "Sir," one officer said, "you're under arrest for impersonating a member of the Queen's Guard and causing a public disturbance." The guard raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine, you caught me. But admit it, I gave the people a show they'll never forget." As the police cuffed him, Karen shouted, "You're a hero, don't let them take you." The crowd erupted into a mix of laughter, applause, and jeers. The officers led the impostor away, his plastic crown slipping to the ground. Meanwhile, the tourists began sharing their videos online, dubbing him the TikTok guard. Back in the courtyard, George straightened his tie and addressed his group. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, there's your lesson for today. Not everything in London is as it seems." The tourists dispersed, still chuckling and shaking their heads. And as for the impostor, His antics went viral, but not before earning him a hefty fine and a lifetime ban from Buckingham Palace grounds. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and let us know in the comments which guard tradition you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video.